Now, I know this might come as a surprise to some of you because I've heard you say that you don't see yourself this way, but I believe we are all creators. We are all given the gift of creativity. And my first reason for believing that is because we were created in the image of God who created the world, the universe, and all that there is. When we hear this story from the book of Genesis, we hear about God, not just about what was created, but we are told something important about the Creator. As we walk through the days of creation, it becomes readily apparent that God is a relational God, creating things that not only stand on their own, but work together to become something more. And it is in that relationship with one another and the balance of creation that God speaks of goodness. Creation is not a standalone thing. It isn't light here and earth there, water there. All of these things work together to create a world, something that God speaks into being, maybe sings into being. In seminary, we always talked about how there's no one in a boat somewhere watching this happen. So they're not writing down what they saw happen, but this story was written down and attributed to Moses, who wrote down the story of creation. And that story tells us as much about the one who creates as about what they made and created before us. My favorite creation story is the one from Narnia that speaks of a song that brings forth creation. And when we talk about creation, I wonder if sometimes we don't put it too far in the past, as if God did all of that and stopped. But isn't it true that we believe that God continued to create, continued to build relationship, to seek after those connections that had been begun in the beginning? And as we think about this story and we think about what the world was created for, we can still see how we, in this time, have an opportunity and a responsibility to continue the work of creation that builds relationships, that restores connection, and that brings balance to all. When I lived and worked in Indianapolis, I was a part of a United Methodist Church that met on Sunday evenings. And they had this really wonderful band of these tremendous musicians. And I remember once hearing them practice. And they sort of stopped and they said, "Now, which harmony are you going to take?" And I said, "Well, how do you pick your harmony? How do you make it up?" And one of the musicians looked at me and he said, "We don't make it up. They're all there. We just have to sing them." As we think about what creation is, I wonder if it isn't similar to that, that all of the potential, all of the possibility is there. It is simply about singing them, bringing them into our bodies and putting them out into the world that makes them so. That through the Spirit of God, are we able to perceive something which we did not see before? And are we able to bring that perception, that seeing, into our life and our living out of faith? It is my belief that the Spirit enables this in us. And it is why I preach that God builds us up and enables us to embody the love of Christ in the world in such tangible ways that they not only make us feel good, but they bring change that is needed to restore creation to its intended way of being. As Christians, when we look out into the world, I don't think that we can see it as one that God hoped for. There is so much brokenness and violence. There is so much harm done to people and in places, some so close to us and some so far away. But we also see hope and the movement of the Spirit. Sometimes we don't recognize it as such, but I believe God is at work. That God is still speaking into creation and bringing forth the goodness that was intended. Don't get me wrong, this isn't an easy process. I wonder sometimes if we had been in that boat at creation, if simply hearing God speak forth, moving the wind of the Spirit through the earth, if it wouldn't have been terrifying as it was wonderful. Because there is something so much bigger than us at work in the world. So what does it mean for us right now? For creations of this God who created a world that was good in all its connection, in all the relationship, in all the balance that was a part of the beginning. I believe that we are called to the act and the practice of restoration, that we are called to be repairers of the breach, the places where there is brokenness. We are invited and emboldened and empowered to restore, to heal, to find a way to build again. When there is harm being done to the beloved children of God in the world, that is something where God is calling us to see an opportunity for us to respond, to repair the breach. And sometimes that looks like us going out and doing something, building a literal bridge. But sometimes the work of repair is to be done in our own hearts, in our own minds, in our own perceptions. Because sometimes the brokenness of the world is so deep in us, it takes a major disruption to see it. In the year, whenever I was on maternity leave with Artie, I participated in what's called the Shift Lab. It's an endeavor put on by the Edmonton Community Foundation. And its sole purpose is to try and build systems that will contradict and confront racism. And in our work together, we brought together this group of people from all these different places with different backgrounds and experiences. And the idea was that we could try to do something together. And that those ideas that came together, that were born out of this group of people, not who looked the same or who had the same ideas, but who were willing to be opened to what they didn't know about one another, that maybe we could come up with some things that would help repair the world. And in that time, I met with many Indigenous leaders in Canada and in Alberta. And one teacher who was part of our group, on our first meeting, we sat around in a circle, all these different people. And she said, in my tradition, she's Cree and Mohawk. She said, in my tradition, in my community, when we introduce ourselves to people, we don't just give our name and where we're from. We also talk about who it is that we are responsible for and responsible to. Inherent in the introduction of who they are, they include who they are in relationship with. Relationship is key. From the very beginning, God introduced this relationship in creation, light and darkness, night and day, animals and creation, humankind and creation and the animals. They all go together. They all are intertwined in this larger picture. It's so large, in fact, that we still don't understand it. For all the years that we've had scientific technology, we have learned so much about how our world works, about how our bodies work, but there is still so much we don't understand. But we do know that relationship is key. When one thing is out of balance, the whole thing is out of balance. And so part of the work of restoration is the work of relationship. What would it be like if, as believers and followers of Jesus, we walked out into the world and we introduced ourselves, not just who we are, but who we are responsible to and who we are responsible for? What if, when we begin to see places of brokenness, we see ourselves being called back to those same people who we are responsible to and for, to speak of what we have seen, to think about and to use what we have seen to engage in the changes that may repair that brokenness? There are so many ways for us to turn away from what we see. We can choose to look elsewhere. But I wonder if God isn't at work in the Spirit, bringing us towards these places of brokenness because we are inherently capable of repairing those relationships. Because as human beings, we bear the image of God. We have been created in such a way that we are able to hold something of God's image and to live into that image with our lives. It's this amazing and tremendous promise that we are capable, through the activity of the Spirit in our lives and in our hearts, to see creation restored, to see the world brought back into its original purpose and intent. There are so many places where we can find brokenness to be repaired. In this moment in time, much of the world's attention is on the brokenness of racial injustice. And it's hard to keep looking, to keep seeing the ways that it is harmful to our Black and Indigenous people of color, brothers and sisters throughout the world. It is hard for me to see where it is that I perpetuate those systems that do harm. But I also am filled with hope because I know that I have been given the capacity to remedy those systems, to work to change them, to take them apart, and to renew them in a way that honors God's image in my brothers and sisters. I have a part to play in this repair, and so do you. It is in the creation of the world that we first see who God is. And God is not outside of relationship, but is in relationship. This Sunday is traditionally called Trinity Sunday, when we get to dig into what does it mean that God is three persons in one? What does it look like? that God is not singular, but plural, but singular again. There's so much mystery in the Trinity that I don't even think I can come close to offering you an answer about what does that mean. But it does leave me with an image that helps me on this day. Most of you know I grew up in North Carolina. So one of my favorite things to do when I was growing up was going to the annual square dance that was put on for the youth of the Moravian church in the southern province. And so if you don't know about square dancing, it really works best in a big group. And if you looked at it from up above, you might think that people were going to run into each other. But somehow the dances move people around quickly, but with such grace that they kind of intertwine and change partners and move. And it's amazing to watch and really fun to do. When I was studying in seminary, this was the image I had of the triune God, the Trinity, that they're like a square dance, moving in and out with intricate moves and steps, always intertwined and always moving. And if one of those players wasn't part of the dance, it wouldn't be complete. And so I wonder on these days if restoration of the relationships in creation, of the brokenness that we see around us, isn't like inviting more people into the dance, seeing the dance become more and more complete as each of us learn the steps and do them together. When God created the world, God looked at it in all of its wonder and said, "It is indeed very good." If it was good then, God can continue to make it good as each of us commits ourselves to the hard work of seeing where the relationship has broken down and working to repair the breach. Amen. Ken and Jen are going to offer us